messages! Hey there,
A new message! Okay, I'll just take it, thank you. Okay, fuck off! Alright, what is this? Oh, it's the top 5 things that should be in Rise! Fantastic!
Hello, my fellow hunters. Today it's time to... What was that voice? Today it's time to plot world domination. No, today it's time to talk Rise, because let's be honest, every day until the release of Rise is time to talk Rise, and even then, every day post the release of Rise is time to talk Rise, until such time that we're on the game after Rise. But that's really getting ahead of ourselves, because for now, we are going to decide, declare the 5 things that need to be in/happen with Rise, at least as far as I'm concerned. So without further ado, let's hope. And number 5 then is a skill system that is somewhat hybridized between the old and new style. I'm of the opinion that the old way of doing things is very much defunct. It's very unintuitive, it's very complicated, you have to add up to 10, so if you get 4 from your chest, 3 from your legs, 3 from your arms, you make 10, which activates the skill. Some skills have another activation at 15 and 20, which increases their potency, and it's just, you have to start doing maths on your armor, you have to start getting programs to work out sets for you. Shout out to Athena's armor set search, which really, you know, was everybody's saving grace, and it just kind of is an experience of, okay, if I want to have both weakness exploit and critical boost, but I also want to make sure that I have sharpness, and then we need to make sure focus is in there, and oh my god, there's hundreds of pieces of armors with decorations and charms that can drop with various configurations of abilities as well, so everything needs to add up, and oh my god, I just want to play Monster Hunter! It's not the most fun experience in the world. Though, granted, I do over-exaggerate with how complicated it is. It's not that bad, but it's just not really fun. Whereas I think the argument could be made in World and Iceborne, it's a little bit too simple, and don't get me wrong, if I get 2 ranks of attack, I want to have rank 2 of attack, and I want them to actually do something, you know, that's intuitive, that feels good. But we've got to the point now where you essentially have every skill you could ever want. There's no real choice or specialization, you don't really have a weakness, you get every damage skill, you get your health boost, you get your utilities, and you just cram it all in there and jobs are good. And you have skill lists with like 15 skills on, and it's kinda crazy. I like the idea of having to choose what you're going to aim for, what you'll be strong in, and make the decision on what to sacrifice that you'll be weak in. So to me, I'd like a hybrid skill system. So that yes, every rank or point in a skill does something, but until you get a combined total amount in a skill, it doesn't do something major. So kind of like how attack is currently. You get to rank 4 attack, and that magic threshold also gives you 5% affinity. So imagine that, but for every skill. You get to weakness exploit rank 2, and that, you know, helps a little bit, 10% more affinity on weak parts, but then you get to rank 3 and suddenly, boom, 50%, a huge leap, you've reached the breakpoint for that skill. So yes, all of the little points along the way do something, but you have to choose 2 or 3 skills that you're going to really invest in, get to like plus 10 or plus 15 that give you huge bonuses, while everything else just gives you a little boost for you having had it. And I think that way we still have the choice, we still have to design sets, but it also doesn't feel lame that all of these plus points on your armor are doing nothing until you get a huge amount of them. Granted, that's just my idea, it's kind of a topic I want to discuss much more in detail and not as part of a list, but I'm throwing it out there for now, and I would love to get your guys' thoughts on it. Next up at number 4, it is the focus on the monster's ecology. I realise it's not the most common want, but I also know a lot of you, like me, do love the actual, you know, living, breathingness of Monster Hunter. And with Rise, we're getting even bigger maps. We know endemic life's returning. We're seeing even more advanced turf wars. I want to see the behavior patterns of monsters turned up to 11. I want to be able to follow them round, and if there's equivalent of Gillimantle, in this invisible while they do what they do and just observe them, because it's fascinating. It's why I fell in love with the series, how real, even back then, the monsters were compared to just a traditional generic boss big mad. And I want to see that go even more, especially if we have the huge maps to accompany it. Maybe we can get even more than 3 monsters per map. I would absolutely adore it. I'd love for monsters to be able to actually affect each other in a much, much deeper way too. Or maybe actually interact with endemic life. Maybe actually follow round our lovely new friend Technosom and see him hunt and eat the Alteroth. Now, we do, of course, see monsters hunt in World and Iceborne. They hunt the Aptonoth and such, but I want to take that even further. I really want to see the monsters interacting in as animalistic a way possible. And granted, that might be optimistic because the environments are definitely getting less detailed, less cluttered, but with the focus on exploration, you can't just have the monsters wandering around kinda aimlessly like they don't know where they are, like they did in the old games. So here's hoping. Next up, I think quite an easy one to just throw out there and say, we want weapon variety. I mean, we just do. It was nice, I think, as an idea to have the more realistic look, your bone and your iron base with bits on, but it's Monster Hunter, and Monster Hunter has always been synonymous with ridiculous, over-the-top weapons. I mean, just look at the goddamn rocket-powered greatsword! Which, admittedly, isn't even a weapon designed by the Monster Hunter team, as it was a competition winner, but that still epitomizes what is Monster Hunter weaponry. From fighting things with a goddamn shark and frying pans, knives and forks, the beer mugs now, it really is lovely. But even then, the cool end of the spectrum, the good weapons, something like Gog Mazios's greatsword with the chains and the runes, oh, that being reduced to just a bit of metal with some tarry scales on would be truly tragic. Much how Glavenus got shafted with his monstrosity. So this one isn't really out there, it's something I'm sure every single Monster Hunter player shares. Let's just go mental with the weapons again. Vibrant, colourful, funky, and great for stabbing monsters to death. Next up, I think this is one that can be very unique to Rise, and that is a more emphasis on the map itself. Because Monster Hunter maps have always been just, well, sectioned arenas to fight monsters, and you might think, well, yeah, duh, that's the point of the game, and it is, of course. But with World and Iceborne, we saw just how detailed and beautiful and living and just incredibly realized these environments could be, and how well the monsters can interact with them, and how it can literally make you feel like you are crashing through a jungle while desperately fighting for your life against some colossal beast. So for Rise, given the emphasis on bigger maps, given the emphasis on exploration, on climbing, on secrets, I want to actually have, well, that exploration be meaningful. I want to have parts of the map that are hard to get to, that reward you. Maybe like the secret resource areas you can start in if you eat for the right skill or get lucky in the old games, but more of a deliberate, I'm going to go find them. And yes, you're into the problem that after enough time in release, all of the locations of every secret will be released and found and categorized and listed, and they won't really be secrets anymore, but routine. So maybe you could solve that with just the slightest amount of randomness whenever you load into the map, but that also kind of takes away from the Monster Hunter experience, which is learning and knowing the maps and having it be the same every time. But I would love there to be areas also like Teostra Nest that isn't even open unless Teostra is there, but even more tied to the monsters. Imagine if there was an area you had to lure a monster to, get it to do a particular attack against, it broke down the wall, and then you access that area. Stuff like the avalanche on Hoarfrost Reach, and yes, you can get to that cave without it, but imagine if that avalanche was the only way to access the cave system, and there was something rewarding waiting for you down down there. Something actually meaningful, maybe beyond just rare resources, but something that is actually going to be tangible, like an ancient weapon or armor rusted that you clean up. And that's happened a few times in Monster Hunter, where you get relic equipment, figure out what they are and if it's worth using. But I just want it to be worth climbing to the top of a random mountain, searching through a ruin and finding something, you know, just something. And hey, maybe with the proposed crossover connection with Monster Hunter Stories, we might find eggs to transfer to that game. That could be neat. But either way, the TLDR, I want exploration not to just be something you can do, but I want it to matter, and I want secrets to find that ideally involve monsters' help, whether willing or otherwise. And finally then, I think this is the #1 request I have in every single Monster Hunter game, always, is monster variety. And this is one thing that they've said they are going to focus on, so this request should be very much fulfilled. I want your snakes, I want your frogs, I want your insects, I want a new type of monster. I would much rather have huge variety than loads of endgame super deadly elder dragons. I'd rather fight an army of quirky monsters with huge personality, or in Tetranadon's case, just huge.
Hi!
Don't worry, buddy. I love you. I really do. It's fantastic to see amphibians return. But at the same time, I really want to have loads of different monster shapes to fight. There are only 2 main issues I have with World and Iceborne, only 2 negatives. One of them, let's not bring up right now. The other one is the lack of that variety. Not being able to bump into the leviathans, the insects and such, and seeing how they interact with the world, how they turf war, how they operate. We need that back. We need that skeleton depth. We need to see how ridiculous Monster Hunter can be, because that huge variety of monsters is so intrinsic to the experience. The world is alive, and of course the animal kingdom is full of every some such shape, size, type, color, everything. Animals are mental, and so are monsters if they actually are allowed to be here and return. And it looks like that is indeed happening already. Azeroth signifying the bears. We've got the Nursery type monster for the insects. I just want them to expand on the categories that have nothing. So for me, more amphibians, more snakes, more insects. That's the 3 that I want to see really reign supreme. I want tier 3 snakes, amphibians, and insects. I want Elder Dragon strength snakes, amphibians, and insects. I want it to be the reign of the weird. And as an addendum to this, I want it to return some end bosses, because Monster Hunter has a habit of introducing just some incredible, colossal fights worthy of the end of all of your hunting and training. You know, the Sharish Valda, the Xenojiva, the Gogmazios Lord himself, and then you just never see them again. Never. I want to see one of them. Gogmazios is my 2nd favorite monster of all time, and I got to fight him in just 1 game. So please bring him back. Though if I had to choose one end boss to return, it would be Atalkar. Given that the maps are bigger, you could have Atalkar actually roam around on the mech while you're fighting her across the zone, going over mountains and cliffs, crashing through various maps. You don't need to give her her own arena. And imagine her mech, which was kind of clunky and awkward to climb up in the old game, but with the wire bug and the climbing system. Imagine her mech actually moving along the terrain while you shimmy up the side, wire bug to the top, scoot across it, and actually find and pop the web masses to bring it down, and wherever you happen to bring it down, that's where you fight her. It would be a wonderful experience. So that's my few little thoughts on what I'd like from Rise, and of course there's a million more as we draw towards, well, its release and even more details. But for now, let me know what you think, like if you enjoyed this, and subscribe for more. A good boy.
Rage Gaming with the video float.
But that's all that's really relevant at the mo, but I'm still gonna leave this up so you patrons know that I love you, even though the outro's no longer that kind of relevant. But the new one's being worked on, and it's gonna be a truly badass song, and don't worry, I won't be doing any rapping on it. I'm gonna go now. This was shit.